Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing, Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Canelo Alvarez is a guy, some would say, is the new Chuck Norris. You know, Canelo Alvarez, like Chuck Norris, doesn't do push-ups. They push the earth down. Now, if you let most of these people out here, when it comes to Canelo, if you let them tell it, Canelo Alvarez is indestructible. But you have to give him some credit because of what he's done. Ever since the Mayweather loss, him being able to reinvent himself. But he's on a path right now to where I think it's good to have confidence in your abilities. He's proven to be a guy who can go back after each fight, learn more, make those necessary refinements, and come into his next engagement and look even more spectacular. Now, prior to the Caleb Plant fight, Canelo had started kind of working on the high guard defense, and it was getting him some success. But if you peel it back even a few more fights, he was more, coming forward, but a lot more head movement, upper body movement, using his legs to get out of range more. But it's like when he decided that he was going to go and work on not really using his legs to get out the way and use all upper body movement. Head from the waist, shoulders, and just he built on it to where he was no longer just doing the different things with his body to get out the way, but now he started to incorporate countering. And not just counter punching, countering with combinations. And once he starts walking you down and effectively cutting that ring off and puts that mental pressure on his opponent, they don't stand a chance. And that's why Canelo's the heavy favorite going in against Bivol. Now, for those of you who wonder what Canelo's going to do next, Canelo already said they're looking to unify the light heavyweight division. Easier said than done. Okay? But remember, Canelo's not a small guy. And when he fought Floyd Mayweather, Floyd weight drained him. Okay? He did. And Canelo didn't like that, but he had to do it because that's what Canelo was taking notes. He recognized that there's something called an A side and B side in the sport. Canelo was the man until he came up against Mayweather. And when I say the man, I'm not talking about who's the better boxer and who's not. I'm talking about as far as the purse, the split, the ring walk. Hell, man, who's singing different anthems, everything. Who's gonna drive? What weight they're fighting at? Canelo, it's like Canelo walked into a room and he had a voice. Mayweather had a bullhorn. You know what I'm saying? And Canelo learned from that. So he went in there with Mayweather and he got clipped. And he got outboxed and he got humiliated. And the one thing Canelo wasn't doing in that fight, he wasn't just trying to walk him down with a high guard. He was letting his hands go a lot and was missing horribly. And that was very discouraging. You could see on his face like he just couldn't touch Mayweather. So when people are saying that Canelo right now will beat Floyd Mayweather, a prime Canelo, they're saying that he's in his prime right now, will beat a prime Floyd, okay? Stop it. A prime Floyd? Which one? Pretty Boy? Or the guy who was transitioning from Pretty Boy to Money May? The guy who fought De La Hoya? Because that guy after he fought De La Hoya and started becoming Money Mayweather, he still had some Pretty Boy in him. So that monster, you trying to tell me that this Canelo will beat that Floyd? Look, I'm not even a guy that's biased towards boxers. I'll say it again. My two favorite fighters were Chris Bird and Zab Judah because what I was able to take from them watching their fights and go and take that into a boxing ring, especially doing a lot of sparring. I did a lot of sparring because, moving around the way I was hard to continue with an amateur program. But I was always down there in boxing. Everywhere I went, I found a boxing gym. And let me tell you, those are my two favorite fighters. But when it comes to Floyd Mayweather and Canelo, I like them both equally. But you just can't convince me that this Canelo, that right now everybody's saying he's in his prime, and he would beat Floyd Mayweather in his prime. There's no, impossible, impossible. Okay, Canelo is nowhere in the world he's beating Floyd Mayweather ever. So just stop. Now, if this Canelo fought this Floyd, I don't know, man. If Floyd decided to come and fight Canelo and Floyd gets back in the gym, you never know. But I would go ahead and say that this Floyd right now, who has been really fighting exhibition, but for the most part has been inactive, that's not even fair. So why would anybody want to push to see this Canelo fight Floyd? This Floyd. That's crazy. Okay? He shouldn't even want to take credit for that win if he was to fight Floyd right now. And Floyd wouldn't do it anyway. But for all the people out there, man, coming up with these, dream fights, like, you got it. Floyd was old. Floyd wasn't young. And he still went out there and outboxed Canelo. So I just think we need to stop. But for those of you who, but first I want to tell you, I rate Canelo, man. Canelo is amazing watching him in the ring. And I keep going back to it, no matter what you think about Canelo Alvarez. If you say, oh, it's the opponents he's facing, that's why he's able to look like that. Forget what he did inside the ring, right? Because I'm not trying to convince you one way or the other. Your opinion's your opinion. But look at how he responded when Caleb Plant slapped him. Canelo rolled with the punch, came back with that signature uppercut hook. Plant had no idea that shit was coming at him. And that's what Canelo does in fights. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because it just shows you that what he's doing in the ring, that's not staged. That's not something that's been choreographed between Canelo and his opponents. Canelo trains, and the way he trains is the way he fights. And that's why when that kind of impromptu brouhaha took place, Canelo was able to respond like that because that man lives and breathes boxing. That was any and everybody who witnessed that, whether you like Canelo or not. Canelo gained fans by letting that uppercut go and that damn hook. You know what I'm saying? That man threw that 4-3 crazy. Boom, bip. But forget that. So since we're talking about Canelo, and Canelo being, tougher than Chuck Norris, you got to take a look at, this man has had so many fights. But I'm going to go back. I'm not going to go all the way back. I'm just going to start off with the fight that really got my attention for Canelo. That's when he fought Jose Miguel Cotto, Miguel Cotto's older brother. And that fight, he knocked Jose Cotto out. But that was the one fight I've seen Canelo win where Canelo got hurt. Canelo was out on his feet. I don't know what kept him up. But he ended up coming back and stopping Miguel Cotto's brother, Jose. Excellent fight, but Canelo learned from that. And after that, he came back, fought a guy named Luciano Cuello. TKO'd him in the 6th. Another one of those where you can see he's learning. But then he comes now, and this is where Canelo's really starting to get some steam outside, of Mexico and outside of the Mexican fan base. Because he got in there with Carlos Baldomir. You remember, Baldomir was still kind of riding high because his claim to fame was clipping Zab Judah. Zab Judah was eating Baldomir alive early in the fight, and then stamina issues kicked in, and Baldomir non-stamina issues kicked in, and he started letting his hands go, and he was giving Zab Judah hell. Baldomir won the fight. But Canelo comes and fights Baldomir and knocks him out cold. 6th round. Now people are really paying attention to him. Because they're like, wow. It's not just that he outboxed him, it's the way he knocked him out. Because Baldomir was a tough opponent. But It's the way Canelo knocked him out. It was just showed that his hands are super heavy, and it showed that he's doing something right in those training camps. And the thing that I like about Canelo, and that's why you see this kind of like an order of progression with him, is every time he went back after a fight, he made tweaks, he made refinements. He didn't go back and not make any adjustments and come back into another fight and still make the same mistakes. And then here it is, 3-4 fights down the line, you got to go into training camp and have a complete overhaul of your style, your strategy, your conditioning program, your nutrition. So he was always tweaking his professionalism after each fight. So now after he gets past Baltimore, he gets in there with Endo and unanimous decision. Gets in there with Matthew Hatton. Matthew Hatton fought with a lot of heart, but he got beat all around the ring. All around the ring. That little bald head, man, was just getting tattooed by everything Canelo threw. And eventually, man, fight came to an end, but Hatton took a lot of punishment. And just showed, man, that he's Ricky Hatton's brother. They cut from a different kind of cloth because Canelo couldn't stop him. But he was putting that heat on him. But Hatton obviously may have one of the best chins in boxing, just no one talks about him. But if you watch that fight with him and Canelo, we can have a debate on whether he does or doesn't have one of the best chins in boxing, because he took some hard shots from Canelo and made it through the fight. Then he went on and KO'd Ryan Rhodes in the 12th. And then Alfonso Gomez, you guys remember him from I think it's a Contender. And he ended up, he kind of raised his profile. Sergio Moro's on the Contender. Peter Manfredo. Those were three of the bigger names. K9, Bundridge. You guys should know those names. But Alfonso Gomez kind of got a little buzz with that. Then you see him here in the professional ranks where before no one paid him any attention. He's on there with Sugar Ray Leonard, Sly Stallone. Profile gets raised. I think it was a Contender. Because De La Hoya had one too, but I think it was a Contender. And then he comes in now, he's fighting professionally, and he's looking pretty good. Gets a little fight against Canelo, Mexico against Mexico, and just got, obliterated. And by round 6, Canelo just had too much firepower. Then Canelo goes on, fights Kermit Cintrone, KOs him within 5. After Kermit Cintrone, gets into with Shane Mosley. Everybody's expecting Shane Mosley to do something spectacular, but Shane Mosley was a shell of himself. Let's just be real about it, okay? Not trying to discredit Canelo. Look at where he's at now. There was something special about him then. A prime Shane Mosley would have still been something special about Canelo. But Shane Mosley just wasn't that same guy. And Shane Mosley went the full 12 rounds, but he just really didn't have nothing for him. Canelo gets in there with Josecito Lopez. Hey, Josecito Lopez let his hands go. He got a respect from Canelo, but ultimately, by round 5, he just couldn't take that firepower was coming back. I remember Josecito Lopez saying that Canelo was chingao. First time I ever heard that, but I guess it's slang for a bad MFer. And but I remember him saying that at the end of the fight because Canelo just beat him all over the ring. Then after that, Canelo gets in there with Austin Trout. Austin Trout, man, did very well. I think Austin Trout at that time, I think he had just come off the Cotto fight. But anyway, he gets in there with Canelo and outboxing him and making Canelo look bad. But Trout got, a little lapse in judgment for just that split second. And Canelo dropped him with that crazy right hand. And that's when Trout's legs just, lost control. But Trout made it to the finish line, which was good. But so far, look at these names. When you're familiar with these names, that tells you that these guys are making some noise at some point in time. These are the guys Canelo's been fighting. After Trout, he gets in with Floyd Mayweather Jr. We all know what happened there, okay? After that, he gets in with Angulo, clips Angulo, TKOs him. Gets in there with Lara. The verdict's still out on that fight. Me personally, I think Lara lost his right to complain because he chose to reduce his activity level, and try to 1 or 2 pop shots and Canelo was coming on just letting his hands go nonstop. And don't get me wrong, Lara's shots did look a lot cleaner. He did make Canelo miss a whole lot, but you have to let your hands go in order to win rounds. And I guess it just depends on the judging. But even for me, I remember watching the fight, shouting at the TV, like, let your hands go. But, Canelo was just stalking him. But it is what it is. Canelo, to me, deserved that split decision win. And Lara lost his right to complain because he didn't let his hands go. And after Lara, Canelo goes in there and fights James Kirkland. Everyone gave James Kirkland a chance. Remember that James Kirkland that had fought the Colombian kid, man. Julio something, man. It was a Colombian kid. Real strong, heavy hands. But he was hitting Kirkland with all kind of bombs. And Kirkland it was like a damn train. That's when Ann Wolf was really having him out there, flipping tires and pulling tractors and all kind of craziness. Damn, his name just came to my head. Julio. But anyway, doesn't matter what his name is. But Kirkland now, if you think about that fight against that guy, you're expecting Kirkland to come out and give Canelo a stiff challenge, a stiff test. It's not what happened. Kirkland got clipped. I mean, one of the most vicious, I think that was like a knockout, one of the, in the running for like knockout of the year, when Canelo clipped him. It was bad. But in that fight, James Kirkland wasn't with Ann Wolf. Because I remember Ann Wolf saying, that little redhead MFer can fight. But, it is what it is. James Kirkland wasn't with her. People felt he would have won that fight had he been with Ann Wolf. And we all know what's happened with James Kirkland since then as far as his career. Then he got in there with Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto put up a valiant effort, but he just didn't have enough to keep Canelo off him. He took a lot of shots, and he was just left-hand dependent in that fight because it was with Freddie Roach, and Freddie Roach felt like Miguel Cotto had stopped using the left hand, the big left hook. And when, I think Cotto got a little false sense of, confidence because he came out there and clipped the guy from Argentina, Sergio Martinez, and he clipped the guy before that Dominican dude, that big left hand. But got in there with Cotto, it just didn't work out. So after he blasted Miguel Cotto, and they go to a full 12, but he banged Miguel Cotto up a lot. He gets in there with Amir Khan. I personally thought Amir Khan was going to beat him. I did. I was like, Khan's going to smoke him. He's not going to be able to touch him. And that's how it looked. Those first 3-4 rounds. But then you could see Canelo was just getting a little closer. And then round 6, he DMX'd him, man. Here comes the boom. Sean Paul and DMX'd him and got him out of there. After Amir Khan, he went on to Liam Smith. Then he went to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., weight drain Chavez Jr., Gennady Golovkin, 1 and 2. I think Golovkin won both of those fights. I'm not here to argue with nobody, but Golovkin, you can't tell me Canelo won that first fight. And I watched the second fight. Matter of fact, I was watching that second fight. I was in enemy territory watching that fight. And what I mean by that, it was a pro-Canelo crowd. I'll just leave it as that. And, they were talking so much trash. And I was like, we'll see. And every round, we were scoring it every round. It's me against like 25 people, man, pro-Canelo. Some of the cats in there didn't even speak English. All it is, hey, Canelo, Saul, Canelo. I'm like, nah, Gennady. By like the 7th round, they were shouting at the TV for him to let his hands go. You know what I'm saying? And by the end of the fight, they were like, Golovkin won. I was like, I think so. And then when the cards were read, they were like, nah, they robbed Golovkin. These are Canelo fans. And we're all watching this together. That's what they're saying. They're like, nah, he lost. So we know the deal with that. I did a video, Boxing's Corrupt, De La Hoya, at the time, Golden Boy, all the BS. Canelo was a golden child. They couldn't let him lose. But he lost both of those fights. And, I'd argue that with anybody. Canelo, yeah, he tried something different to walk Golovkin down. They say he ran the first fight, called himself walking him down. I mean, he tried, but, he just wasn't letting his hands go enough. But I think he lost both fights. Then he got in there with Rocky Fielding, Daniel Jacobs, Kovalev, Caleb Smith, Avni Yildirim, Billy Joe Saunders, we know what happened with that. Then Caleb Plant. So when you look at these names, Plant, Sanders, Yildirim, Smith, Kovalev, Jacobs, Fielding, Golovkin, Chavez Jr., Smith, Khan, Cotto, Kirkland, Lara, Angulo, Mayweather, Trout, Lopez, Mosley, Kermit Cintrone. Those are huge names in boxing. This man, except for Mayweather and Golovkin, I don't care what you say, just walk through those guys. So that's why, man, when it comes to Saul Canelo Alvarez, man, Mr. 57 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws, 39 KOs, it's hard to vote against him. It is hard to vote against him, but he's going up against a beast in Dimitri Bivol. And we'll see what happens in that fight. I already did a video on that. I'm not going to go into it. But Canelo Alvarez, he's earned the right to be favored going to almost any fight that he chooses. Now, he's taking it to the stupid on a little bit that he's talking about. I'm about to make a video on that where he's talking about going up against, I just put it to you this way. A good big man beats a good little man. That's proven to be true over and over. So Canelo needs to just pace himself properly because, I hate to see him get hurt because he starts messing around and poking these bears out here. He's going to get hurt. Somebody going to eat him. But anyway, man, that's my spiel on Canelo. Canelo Alvarez is the man. And that is why Eddie Hearn is holding him so close. Because he looks at what he's done. He looks at what he should be able to do this weekend. It's not going to be easy. And that's why Eddie Hearn and Canelo are now buddies. I just did a video on that, calling him his friend. Not hearing much about AJ. And Canelo has earned everything that he's getting right now. But I personally think Canelo is the new Chuck Norris. And we'll see just how far he can take it since he's talking about fighting another 7 years. But anyway, man, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Even if you don't, I just appreciate you taking time to watch the video. You guys keep cool, and I'm in the breeze.